morning. This is Working Man Bowhunter Butch. You got Working Man Bowhunter West behind the camcorder today. Today we're at North Macomb Sportsman's Club doing some target practicing, getting ready for the upcoming season. And we asked a buddy to come up here today, and he said he couldn't come because he didn't have his arm guard. He had to go and purchase one, which left Wes and I quite confused of why he would need an arm guard. So after doing a little bit of talking, we came up with two things. He either A, has bad form, which is possible. He just got back into the compound bow shooting, or he has too long of a draw length. And we've heard the old thought process, longer draw length gives you more speed and power, but realistically that's not the case anymore. These bows with the technology are so fast, you don't have to sacrifice draw length to gain that extra speed. So we wanted to make a short video discussing some techniques on form and draw length. I will say Wes and I are not coaches. We're not professional bow shooters. We are die-hard bow hunters. We've killed a lot of deer, and we do a lot of practicing, and we try to pride ourselves on proper form and proper technique. And I will say, as we both have two young boys, we're always teaching safety. Safety is so important when you're talking about form and shooting your bow. So the first thing we want to talk about today is going to be draw length. As mentioned earlier, a lot of people want to sacrifice draw length to gain that extra speed, that extra power when you're shooting down range. And as now we're in 2018, you don't need to do that. Wes and I both are Matthews bow owners. He shoots the Halon, I shoot the Tri-X. We both own Creeds that we've started out with before, and we found these bows are very smooth. And again, you don't necessarily need to sacrifice that draw length. So the first thing I would do is I would recommend going to a professional archer shop and having them measure your draw length and having them tell you what draw length you need to purchase. At that point, if you choose to buy a used bow from a buddy, and again, a lot of people are trying to sell their bows as compound bows aren't the fad as now the crossbows are. A lot of people are trying to sell them off and purchase the crossbow. It's beneficial to those who want to upgrade an older style compound bow to a newer one. We're getting some really good deals, but again, make sure you're buying the correct draw length. So when you go to the archery shop, they're going to have you stand like this. They're going to measure from your finger to your hand to your chest, and then they'll tell you your draw length. And Wes and I both shoot 29 inches, which is convenient, so we can share each other's bows if we needed to in a backup situation. But what's important is I'm going to pull back, and I have no arrow in. When you pull back, you want to get your nice form, and my knocking point's on my nose. But if you can notice, the back of the string is at the corner of my mouth, and that's really what you want to be for proper draw length. I'm not way back here, and the reason for that is really it's going to be your fletchings on your arrow. A lot of times you see the fletchings back here and they're rubbing across your face, and then you're wondering why you're getting inconsistent groupings at 20 yards, 30 yards, and so forth. It's because you're getting your fletchings rubbing on your face. You want to have your nock away from there so it's back this way, so when your arrow takes off downfield, you're not having any interference with your fletchings. So now we want to talk about a little bit about form. And the other thing we've noticed is with form is going to be too much poundage. A lot of guys, again, they want that long draw length. They also feel like they have to have a lot of poundage. So if you're pulling back 50 pounds, they think you want to pull back 65. You get that extra poundage, your arrow's going to hit that much harder. And that is true in some cases. But again, you don't want to sacrifice form ever to gain more speed. So if you really shoot 50, and if you can't pull your bow back in a manner like this, nice in a controlled manner, you're probably pulling back too much. If you have to start pulling back your bow this way, or you're struggling to do this, you're pulling back too much poundage. So I would recommend either A, buying a bow that has like a 50 to 60 pound range, having it set at 50 pounds, and then practicing, improving your strength, and then over time building up to shoot 60 pounds don't start right off at 60 pounds. Start off at that 50 pounds. And if you can't pull back 60, then don't buy a 60 to 70 pound bow. It doesn't make any sense. You're only going to start sacrificing form, or you're going to start building bad tendencies for your form, or you're potentially even a shoulder injury. Either of those options aren't good options. So start off with a bow, proper draw length, proper poundage, and now you're ready to go start shooting and worrying about your form. Now that we've talked about some of the basics such as draw length and poundage, we want to start talking about form and some of the things that we look at and we really are diligent about doing every single time we pull back that bow. If it's at a target or an animal, it's the ethical thing to do to ensure you have proper form. Mentioned earlier, Wes and I both shoot Matthews. For this video, I'll be using my Matthews tracks I picked up this spring. And I will say, Wes and I have found that in 2018, all the pro staff level bows are really nice level of quality. If it's Hoyt, Bear, Prime, Elite, Bowtech, PSC, there's so many out there now to choose from. Go to the archery shop, shoot them, pick them up, feel them, see what you're comfortable with shooting, pull them back. And don't be persuaded into a bow because your buddy shoots one and he's trying to convince you to shoot Matthews or Bowtech. Pick the one that's comfortable for you and what you really need. The Tri-X is a 28-inch axle. I like it. Gives me a lot of flexibility if it's in a tree stand or shooting in a ground blind, which we're getting into. It's one that I was comfortable with. I shoot 29-inch draw length, as mentioned earlier, and I pull back. This one's set at just over 70 pounds, which is max for this bow. And if you notice when I'm drawing back, pay attention to how smooth this bow is. It does pull back very smooth. You're not going to see me aiming up, aiming down. Wes and I have found that we really like the Matthews and how they pull back. Now that you've purchased your bow from either an archery shop or from a buddy or a friend, it's time to talk about and concentrate on form. The options that we have our bow set up with are a QAD drop away rest. We are using a black gold single pin sight, and the reason why we use single pin sight versus multi-pin is a few years ago we found it difficult to really get consistent accuracy at that 30 to 40 yard. It wasn't so much your first pin or your bottom pin, but the middle pins. And we've been able to have a lot of luck with a single pin at those groupings. And then release. Wes and I both are going to be using a True Fire finger release. There is a thumb style release, or they call it sometimes a pressure release. When they pull back, it's almost in a reverse function, and they're pushing it with their thumb rather than pulling with their finger. Nowadays, in 2018, you're not going to see a lot of people pulling back with fingers. That's not real common anymore with a compound style bow. That's going to be with a traditional or a recurve style bow. So we want to talk about form, and it's really to avoid using that arm guard so we don't look like you're living in 1977. You have proper draw length, you have proper poundage. It's time to really start focusing on form. So first thing we're going to look at is the way you grip or hold your bow. Potentially one of the most important things when it comes to consistent accuracy downrange. So what we have found is when you have your hand, you want to almost have your bow sitting in the meat of your hand between your thumb and your pointer finger. And when you come in and you squeeze your bow, you don't want to be squeezing it like a fist and holding it too tight, because you'll never get that consistency. You'll start torquing the bow left to right. You want to come in and you want to have your bow grip sit right there in the palm of your hand, kind of like that, and to the point where if you can see, I really have no fingers even touching or squeezing the bow. It's just sitting in there nice and comfortable. I can hold it out there all day long from a comfortability standpoint. My shoulder may get sore, but you can see it's just settling there real nice. And then when I shoot, I can now start looking at proper follow away. So now that we've gripped our bow, we want to look at overall stance. And I've noticed a lot of people struggle with their stance. If it's too wide, if it's too narrow, if it's too spread apart. And again, these are tips that work for Wes and I. That we found we get very consistent groupings when we're practicing. So we like to be just about shoulder width apart, maybe a little bit narrow. We like to have just a little bit bend in our knees, nothing too dramatic, nothing too straight. We like to be just about this far away, shoulder width, nice and comfortable. And we like to always remember, if you're shooting from an elevated platform, which is very popular now, elevated tree stands, you have to remember, bend at the hips. Don't drop your arm because you'll start shooting low, you'll start shooting high. Bend at the waist like this, and then keep your base top even, kind of like that, like this. Bend at the waist. So now that we've gripped our bow, now that we have good stance, it's time to lock on our D loop, our release, and start practicing at pulling back. I mentioned earlier, you never want to pull back like this. If you want to pull back like this, that means something's wrong with the overall poundage. As mentioned earlier, I'm pulling back at just over 70 pounds, and when I pull back, it's nice, smooth, consistent. And now it's going to be the way we're going to ultimately want to have our arm. You don't want to be too forward this way, because look at, I'll never get my knocking point here that way. And this is when it comes to the whole arm guard. A lot of guys have their arms so straight that the string, the cable's coming through and it's slapping their arm, therefore needing arm guard like our buddy. So we believe he has good draw length because, in fact, we were with him when he purchased his bow. His draw length was correct. We feel he went back to some old forms that he was doing back in the day when he was shooting a older style bow. For that speed, he had a real long draw length. So you're going to pull back. Let me put an arrow in so I can show you my knocking point. Never dry fire your bow. I'll mention that. And I've seen a lot of commercials, companies stating that before they sell every bow, they're dry fired. Never take that chance. It is dangerous. And when you are always pulling back, always make sure you're pulling back no different than a gun. Wherever your weapon is pointed, take that very seriously. So always in this case want to have it downrange, never point at anybody, regardless if there's an arrow in it or not. We're going to knock. We have our good stance. We've gripped our bow nice and comfortable. We're going to pull back in a controlled fashion. And I like to take the cable and I like to put it on the tip of my nose. Some guys will put it to the left of their nose, the right of their nose. But whatever you choose, what's comfortable for you, ensure you're doing that every single time. A couple of years ago, I was finding I was all over the place, and I was going once in a while on my nose, once in a while on the left of the right of my nose, and I was all over the place. So remember to do that wherever point you choose every single time. Good stance, gripping the bow, pull back nice and smooth, tip of my nose, and then a slight bend in your arm. Not too much, but slight bend in your arm, at your elbow. And it could be almost, I like to think of it this way, pointing at the sky just a little bit. So good bend in my arm, tip my nose, coming back. And then that's what we would call follow through. And what I'm seeing when we see a lot of young archers getting into shooting compound bows, they're so excited to see where they shot, they're doing this. They're letting go and they're peeking. And that little bit can torque your arrow left, right, up, down, and you'll never have consistent groupings. So let's walk through it one more time. We're gonna get an arrow, we're gonna knock it, put it rest up, get a good stance, lock on, we're gonna pull back. And you want to make sure when you pull back, I should mention the whole squeezing your shoulders together, and you'll find you'll have better luck pulling your bow back. So pull back, nice, arm up, knocking on my nose, and fall away. So to summarize everything together now on form, I'm going to shoot one more time. And Wes and I practice so much, things have become natural to us. But we, again, as we pull back, everything we've talked about, we try to run through our head if we're in a tree stand, if we're practicing, because the old saying, how you practice is how you will perform, either in a competition, a 3D league, which Wes and I shoot in, or if it's going to be in a tree stand. And that could be the most ethically thing to do is practice your form. And then when you're shooting at an animal, you want to make sure you are practicing just as you are in a tree stand, or performing just as you would practice. So good stance, pull back, hold the bow nice and consistent, pull back nice and smooth, good knocking point on my nose, And the reason why we follow through is to avoid what I mentioned earlier, is peaking. If you're teaching somebody young or somebody that's new to shooting a compound bow, ensure that they're not peaking. And I can tell you a story back when I was a young bow hunter a long time ago. I missed an animal, was very bummed out, and I had no clue how I missed so far left. And then I realized that I was peaking. And my buddy actually noticed that when I was shooting, I started every time I wanted to watch where my arrow went. Don't do that. You'll be very disappointed, as I was. So that's why you see a lot of people that just do that and let it fall away. To avoid the left to right to peaking, just let that bow stand there and fall away. That arrow's going to go wherever you have that arrow pointed, that your sight, and you pull the trigger. If you put everything together, you will notice you'll have nice consistent groupings. You'll have a lot more fun when practicing with your friends or if you're in a league, and then ultimately you'll have a lot more fun when you pull back, you let the arrow fly at an animal of your dreams, and it connects where it was supposed to connect. With that being said, I hope this video was helpful. If it's talking about draw length, poundage, or even form, we're trying to provide tips that work for us. So with that being said, thank you for the Working Man Bow Hunter, Butch and Wes. Have a good day.
There I was, back in the wild again, and I felt right at home where I belong. I had that feeling coming over me again.